The next element we're going to take a look at is shape. Everything has shape. As a matter of fact, as children, we learn to identify objects by learning their shapes. We learn to draw simple geometric shapes to illustrate the world. A circle can be used to illustrate the sun. People can be made with lines, triangles, circles, squares. As we get a little older, we begin to read and we learn that letters have different shapes, that this particular shape makes an A, but this one over here is a W. In design, all shapes still define objects, but they also communicate ideas. In a logo, a circle could represent the earth, a half circle could represent the moon. Unusual shapes attract attention. People are so used to seeing rectangular photos that if a photo is set in an unexpected shape, it could catch the viewer's attention. Arranging type in a shape other than a vertical column, which is basically just a rectangle of shape, can also add interest. There are basically three different kinds of shapes. Geometric shapes are what you probably think of when you think of the word shape. These are things like circles, rectangles, octagons. These are regular and structured. They make great building blocks for design. Geometric shapes are also considered pure in form, the absolute basic underlying visual representation of an object. The second kind of shape is the natural or organic shape. These are things that are animal, plant, and humans. They're often irregular as opposed to shapes that are more mechanical in nature, like geometric shapes. And we see them in nature, and with characteristics that are more irregular, free-flowing, informal, and fluid. Examples are things like a blade of grass, or perhaps they could be man-made, like a dab of paint. A border made of ivy vines has an airy, open feeling, and it also can be used as an example of a natural or organic shape. Abstracted shapes are the essence of an organic shape. They are simplified versions of natural shapes. The symbol denoting facilities for the handicap, for instance, the stylized figure of a wheelchair, is an abstracted shape. Some would more specifically call these forms, which are the essential defining parts of an object, mass and proportion. Many times logos are made out of abstract shapes. We can further classify shapes by using these. Positive shapes. In a drawing or a painting, positive shapes are the solid forms in a design, such as the actual bowl of fruit, or in a sculpture, it is the solid form of the sculpture. Then there's negative shapes. So in a drawing, the negative shape is the space around the positive shape, or the shape that is around the bowl of fruit. In a sculpture, it's the empty space around and between the sculptures. There's static shapes, which are shapes that appear stable and resting. And then there's dynamic shapes, which are shapes that appear moving and active. Shape can be defined as any element that is used to give or determine form. Shape elements can be used alone or in conjunction with line and type, and these help communicate the concept of design. Shape can be created in a variety of ways. A photograph, illustration, or block of shading can provide shape, as well as both line and type. Any art that you will add also adds a shape. So photographs and other types of art will always impact your design in two ways simultaneously. First as the shape itself, and second through the content of the actual artwork. With a single shape housing a photograph or illustration, it's added to a format, with or without other elements, and the format instantly takes on a conceptual theme based on the content of the shape of that particular piece of art. Because of this, shape can be the strongest of the elements, because the subject matter of the shape will automatically either contribute or distract the viewer from the intended idea. Therefore, shape in the form of a photograph or illustration needs to be used very carefully. Both line and shape also serve as shapes on a format. A single line can be prominent enough to create shape. A group of several lines can become a border, and that's going to impose a shape on the format itself. Type can be set into a block of text that also compromises a shape. And most of the illustrations in this example just use line or type to create a shape. So you can see here, these 4 lines are creating the shape of a rectangle. Just having lines uniformly placed on my shape also, or on my format, creates a shape of a rectangle. This text right here creates the shape of a rectangle. Here we have text used a little bit differently, and it's creating its own type of shape. And then here we have other elements that are creating shapes as well. Shape can sustain interest. Often shape is used to hold the interest of the viewer. On a page that is heavy with type, shapes, like in the form of photographs, illustrations, or maybe just colored areas or textures, can serve as a relief to the reader. Shapes can also be used to separate and organize and break copy into smaller, more digestible segments. This is a great aid in allowing your viewer to better understand what it is that you're trying to say. When shape is used to separate and organize, it helps to hold the viewer's attention. For example, type can be put into a shape and placed within a larger block of text. This is often how sidebars are treated. Sidebars typically display a sub-theme of the main story, but they're just as valuable visually because they add variety to the layout of the page, and sometimes they're the things that people will read first. Be careful not to use shape indiscriminately. You'll add strength to your design if you can give the page added meaning by using shape instead of by using shapes simply to decorate. Shape organizes. Much of design is nothing more than the organization of elements to support a particular concept. The way those elements are organized can make all the difference. For example, type and shapes placed randomly on a page can be confusing, but solid shapes behind type can serve to organize the body copy. Text itself usually takes on some sort of shape. Think of it set in a column or in a box. It's not always necessary to place type within a shape that consists of a border in a shaded area. Sometimes just the shape of the type itself is enough to break the page up and hold the interest of the reader. When designing a layout, ask yourself if the design is better without the addition of a box to hold type. You can see in this example the type is set in the shape of an arrow, and I don't need any sort of borders to be able to see that arrow. When format is highly structured or loaded with copy, color shapes can be useful to give the page a freer form and to add interest. In the examples shown right here, the same information is shown with and without the shape boxes. So as you can see, with the addition of the boxes, your eyes are drawn to the layout over here on the far right. The layout on the left just looks like a gray box, which is the color of type, while the grayscale boxes behind the type over here help to draw the viewer into the piece and lead them through it. Be careful not to use shapes indiscriminately, as I mentioned. You'll add strength to your design if you can give the page added meaning by using shapes, instead of using shapes simply to decorate. Shapes can also be used as a conceptual tool. Think about how the shape can lead the viewer's eye through the design to help the viewer to understand a concept. In the example to the right, it shows the metamorphosis of a circle into a square or a square into a circle. Notice how your eye automatically wants to find the beginning and the end of the design. You unconsciously look for a starting point and follow the transformation. When a design is composed of many elements, you're going to search for an object or shape that seems to give the design a place to begin and follow that through the design and follow it through to the ending point in an effort to understand and make sense of it. Because of this natural tendency, shape can be used to lead the viewer's eye. Sometimes your eye is drawn to the largest element, sometimes to the most brightly colored object, or sometimes to the object that differs from the rest. Unconsciously, you're going to be searching for a contrasting element to help you find your way through the design. Have you ever considered that type is nothing more than shapes that have symbolically taken on a special meaning when placed in a specific order? We learn to find the first letter of a word and decipher the symbolic shapes in proper order to make sense of the specific message. Shapes that we identify with. As humans, we are drawn to shapes that we identify with. A picture of another human being is usually the first element that the eye will go to when viewing a layout. A photo or illustration of a subject matter will also effectively attract the eye. Large type attracts as well, although it's not as alluring as a visual. And the last thing to draw the eye is usually a shape consisting of small type. Since we are used to seeing shapes of all sorts and to interpreting their meaning in everyday life, it's easy to take the importance of shapes for granted in our design work. But learning how to use shapes to hold the attention of the viewer and to lead the viewer's eye through your design is important. Train yourself to initially ignore the content of the shapes you use and to look at your designs with an eye that is sensitive to seeing how the shapes you've chosen work in tandem with the other design elements. Once the shapes are working together in harmony with line and type, then the content of the shapes becomes critical. Many times, the content of the photo will determine the dimensions and even the shape that you intend to use, but sometimes you'll have control over that as well. Ultimately, shape is the most powerful of the elements since it carries a double whammy: its natural size and dimension, and the content and the information that it contains. Basic shape connotations. Curved shapes like circles are soft. They're carefree, feminine, whole, enveloping, and everlasting. What are you reminded of when you look at a circle? Peace, as in yin and yang, or playfulness, like a child's ball? Commitment, like a wedding ring? Often, when you want to highlight a certain aspect of a layout, you can create a circle around it. Logos are great examples. Take, for example, the Dynamics Lab logo in this particular design. The circle is going to serve to create a feeling of wholeness and serenity. You can also see how the abstract connecting wave elements that are used right here give the circle a sense of flow and connectivity. In addition to using the different colors, it helps to represent the four elements of antiquity. You can see the linking of fire, earth, and water elements, as well as the negative space, which represents air. Rectangles and squares are solid. They're reliable, masculine, and predictable. They're familiar and safe to us because so much of what we interact with in our daily life is in the shape of a rectangle. Your computer monitor, pads of paper, books, desks, even the way the text is set within these items is usually in a rectangular form. We're very familiar with these pieces of everyday life, but then again, they are part of everyday life, so they can be boring and monotonous as well. What reactions are solicited by using rectangles? Usually it's trust, order, security. Many financial institutions use rectangles for their logos. This H&R Block logo is an example. The H&R Block logo exemplifies trust and reliability. The use of the square helps to solidify this message. The square has the implication of being safe and locked down. Everything within it is contained. And the color green also aids in supporting these messages because it implies security, trust, and money. What sorts of things should you consider when using shape? Well, you should think about what kinds of shapes will be most appropriate to your concept. Will you use photographs, illustrations, or shaded areas? How can the shapes you're using be made to sustain the viewer's interest? Will the shapes be used to break up blocks of text or to unify other elements? What shape is your text taking? Does it make sense to break the text into different shapes in order to improve the communication of your message? For example, if your body text is in the form of a wide column, would it help the design to break it into 3 columns? Would the addition of a sidebar aid in readability? Can shapes help you lead the eye through your design? When you look at your design, where does your eye go first? Have you successfully removed any shapes that distract from the idea of the design? Remember that shapes are the most powerful if they support the concept and give the page added meaning, but shapes can actually weaken a design if they're used simply for decoration. With shape, you can do things like crop a photo in an interesting way, drop it into an oval, for instance. You can symbolize an idea, such as a heart symbolizing love. You can make a block of copy more interesting, like set a copy for a Christmas ad in the shape of a tree. You could create a new format, like make a whole new brochure by just making the brochure an actual shape of a triangle, let's say. You could highlight information. You could run a screened or tinted shape behind important copy. You could imply letter forms, like use a triangle to represent a capital A. You could tie a piece of the subject matter together. If you use geometric shapes in an architect's brochure, the natural curvy shape, and then the natural curvy shapes for a dance studio's brochure. And you could tie together all the elements in a layout by repeating shapes that you're using. For instance, you could use square bullets and square copy blocks and crop photos in a square manner. Let's go ahead and let's deconstruct some ads that use shape effectively. The first one we're going to look at is this 1792 Ridgemont Reserve Bourbon. The tagline basically says, we wanted to depict all that goes into our bourbon, but how do you illustrate passion? The hand illustrated artwork inside of the bourbon bottle shows the process of making the actual bourbon. This ad does an excellent job at repeating the shape of the bottle and using this fun and creative spin that also tells a story. Repeating the shape helps to unify the ad as well. So you can see the actual hand illustrations are done in the shape of the bourbon bottle, and then inside this it has the whole process of making the bourbon. The artwork used helps to direct the eye down the ad. At the very top of the ad there is a natural spring that flows into the body portion of the illustrated bottle. And the illustrated arrows, if you look at the example to the right, they direct the user through the distilling process as well as lead them down to the bottom of the ad so that they can read the rest of the copy. So the shape and what's used inside of the shapes definitely helps to lead the viewer down the ad till they get to the bottom and they can get all the information that they need. The next example that I want to show you is the Baltimore Aquarium. This is a series of posters and they're super fun and eye-catching. They're a very playful way to grab the viewer's attention. The series is made up of, I think there's 5 different faces, and they're all constructed from various sea creatures that you'll find at the aquarium. At first glance, you see comical, cartoonish faces, but upon further examination, you can actually see the shape of the animals that make up the whimsical, colorful, and fanciful faces. They succeed in appealing to a wide demographics of viewers. Young and old are going to be enticed by these particular ads. The colorful images of the sea life pops off the black background, making it a striking contrast and helping to draw the user to look at the poster. Creating the familiar and engaging shape of the faces further helps to make one pause and look at the posters, especially since they're so vibrant and so fun. These posters are extremely well executed, and the simple initial shape, the face, is made from the real and complex creatures, and it's an excellent way to advertise the aquarium and a really fun way to use shape. The next ad that we're going to look at is the Prevention Plan poster from the U.S. Preventative Medicine. And this uses an unlikely combination of a large deadly insect that is entirely composed of words. And the particular words are deadly diseases that you need to watch out for. So things like, heart attack, lupus, influenza, HIV, inner back pain, whatever the disease is. The result of what we get is an outstanding use of a shape created entirely with type. Notice the amount of white space that's used on this poster. This luxury of space provides the simple and open backdrop for the star of the show, the scorpion. And this helps focus the user to the subject, making the purpose of the ad apparent, loud, and clear. The carefully constructed appendages of the scorpion show how much of the detail on the legs and the pinchers. The text is still very readable, but each letter has been individually considered as far as size and rotation. Nothing here was left to chance. The tagline, "Learn your health risks now and they won't be so scary later," is doubly supported by the images and the text that is used to comprise the image. This poster is a great example of how shape and type can work together and how shape is used to generate visual interest. The final ad that I wanted to show you is for Still Power Tools. I love this ad on so many levels. It's just an awesome blend of typography, shape, and photography, and it truly creates a dynamic, eye-catching ad. The shape created by the edger generates an intriguing layout. So you see the column right here has been cut off by the edger, and it makes more of an S-type shape. And the ad is a very dynamic ad. The rotation and the position of the cut letters make the viewers feel as if they were just hacked off or sheared off the column. The blend of the photographic product shot with the gray backdrop of the copy really helps to lead the viewer's eye. The alluring fresh cut S shape on the right creates an unexpected use of type in columns, and the generous use of white space along the right edge creates a beautiful balance for this particular page. It's intriguing. If you look closely at the body copy, you'll find a humorous account of Still Power Tools user and the company itself and the products of Still. Not that many people are going to read the whole thing because it's not really necessary to understand what the ad is all about, but if you do, the story is cleverly written and it's interesting, and it's kind of fun to see how they treated the part of the story that was actually sheared off. And then finally, at the bottom portion of the ad, it's framed in a light gray box. This shape helps to ground the rest of the content and to call attention to the supporting text in the ad. So these are ways that you can use shape effectively, and hopefully this has given you a new outlook on shape.